Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Frank Mularcik, and in this video we're going to be talking about a new sort of feature that I added to my dividend tracking spreadsheet that I think could be super useful for a lot of you guys. And just for me, it's something that allows me to sort of visualize better some of my progress over time as I have progressed with the portfolio. So the basic concept is that every single day, this feature is just going to log essentially the date, the value of my portfolio, and some other metrics like we're going to look at right here. So if we check this out, you can see right now we just have a few days done so far. Basically, I created this script about a week ago, and it's been running ever since and logging this data. So it's going to record the date, the value of the portfolio at that time, the annual dividend income that's projected, and the current dividend yield. So first of all, these values aren't going to be perfect because over time I'm adding capital to the portfolio, and I'm only updating this actual spreadsheet once a month or so. So that's definitely going to have an effect, but overall over the long term that's not going to be that big of a deal, and so we're still going to be able to see a progression over the long term. And so I'm putting these values in here, and then I'm just graphing them over time. And right now the graphs look pretty boring because it's only been a few days, so the values haven't really changed much. But I think over a few weeks, a few months, a few years, these graphs will be pretty interesting and will give us a nice visualization of our progression over time. So let's actually jump into how exactly I'm doing this. So I'm using a Google Apps script, and so I've talked about these in previous videos, but I just created a function here called record each day. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just getting the values that I want. So the values I want are the market value of the portfolio, the dividend income, and the dividend yield. So these values are found within my summary page right in this section here. So we have the portfolio value here, the annual dividend income projected, and then the dividend yield down here. And I could just tell it to look at these specific cells, but over time, I could add or subtract positions from the portfolio, which means the rows that these values in are going to change over time. So I needed to have some sort of way to dynamically find these values in the spreadsheet. So what I did is I looked at these titles, and I basically created constants that would look at these titles and then search for them and then store the value of the corresponding actual data point I wanted to look at. So I'm just at the top here, I'm just defining these constants. So data column, that's basically the column that the data I want to look at is in this sheet. So that's in the third column. And then these values here are the titles. So value title, dividend title, and yield title. These are the titles of the sort of labels, I guess, right here that are going to tell us that we're in the correct row that we want to get our data from. And then right here, these are columns within the spreadsheet, that we want to add data to, that are going to tell us which column to add that data to. So this is target date column, so that's the column that we want to add the date to in the target spreadsheet, and then same with the value, dividend, and yield. So we can see in this spreadsheet that we want to add this data to, the date is in the first column, value in the second, dividend income in the third, and yield in the fourth. So that's what that means. And then this row data start, that's just kind of because we can see in our summary page that these values aren't going to begin till around the 30th row, somewhere around there. So there's no need to look at these upper ones, these rows, because these rows are just portfolio holdings, I guess. So I just kind of defined that so I didn't have to look at as many or take as long a time to run this script. And then I'm just defining the sheets. So the target sheet is the sheet that I want to write data to, and then the data sheet is the sheet that I want to read data from. And then these rows here, value row, div row, and yield row, these are the rows of the data that I want to look at in the summary page. So those are just the rows. So I'm going to store the rows once I figure out which rows I want to look at, essentially. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to find what row I want to enter the data in the new spreadsheet. And the way I do that is I actually created a formula over here. If I move this graph out of the way, I created a formula that counts the number of values in column A. And that basically tells us how many values are there. And then that only counts the numerical values, so it doesn't count this date string up here. So it counts 6, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 entered so far. And so it tells us there's 6, but we want to enter in row 8 would be the next entry we make. So that means that we need to add 2 to that. So that's the row that we're going to enter the data in. And then we also want to check if we're at the end of the spreadsheet, because I'm hoping this runs for a long time. So eventually we'll get down to the very end of the spreadsheet. I don't want there to be errors with trying to access rows that don't exist. So we're basically going to check if we're at the end of the spreadsheet. So if the row data entry is greater than the maximum amount of rows in the sheet, then we're just going to append a row with like an empty string in it. That's going to give us an extra row. And then we're going to get the maximum rows in the data sheet, which is the summary page. And we're just going to loop through all the rows in that sheet up until the max row. And this statement here is basically saying if all 3 of these values that we're trying to find are found essentially and set, then I want to break out of this for loop, because more than likely I'm only going to have to look at 5 or 10 rows in this page, in this sheet here, and I don't want to be going on forever and ever when I don't need to. So I'm just going to break out of the for loop if those conditions are met. And then right here I'm actually finding the value, which is going to be the row is just the row that we're in, and then the column is the data column -1. And then I'm just saying, if the value is equal to the title that I defined above for the value, then I'm going to set the value row, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the dividend row and yield row, just checking if this value that we get here is equal to any of these, and then I'm going to set the row to be this row that we're in currently. So we're just looping through each of these values essentially and checking if they're equal to the values that we want to look at, or the titles that we want to look at that correspond to the values that we want to look at. So once I have those rows, then I'm just making sure all of those rows are greater than -1, because that's what I originally assigned them as. And that basically says, well, we found all of the data we wanted to look at. So if that's not the case, then we didn't really find the data we wanted. And so we're just going to log an error. But if that's the case, then we're going to make sure we're going to find the previous date, because the one thing I wanted to make sure of is that we didn't log this stuff on weekends, and it would be easiest to just set this up to run every single day, right? And so if that's the case, then this would run on weekends, but basically I'm just going to delete out the rows that occur on weekends for simplicity, essentially. So I'm just getting the previous date, which is just the target sheet cell, which is in row data entry -1 and target date column. And I'm just making sure that that actually is a date using this instance of. So I'm saying if the previous date is an instance of the date class, or it's a date object, then that's just verifying that it actually is a date. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this get day function, which just gets the day of the week that it is from 0 to 6. So 0 is Sunday and then 6 is Saturday. And so basically if we're in a Sunday or a Saturday, then we want to basically remove that previous entry. So if the day of the week is 0 or 6, that means we're on a Saturday or Sunday, like I said. So we want to delete the previous value. So we're going to delete the row of row data entry -1, and then we're going to decrement row data entry, because now we have one less row. And then the final thing there that we're going to do is we're actually going to just put the new data in. So it's pretty simple. The first value is just the date, so we can just call new date, and that just gets a date time object essentially with the current date and time. And then the next 3 values, we're setting the value, and then we're getting the value from the other sheet where those values actually are. So we're setting the value dynamically and getting the value dynamically, if that makes sense. So that's about it. and we can kind of watch this run. Right now it's a weekend, so you can see that cool little weekend feature. So the last one we had was on February 18th, which was Friday. So the first time we run it, we can see it's just going to add these values in, and now we have a value on the weekend. But when we run it again, it's going to first delete this row. So if you were watching closely, it deleted that row real quickly, and then it added those values back in. So basically, when this runs tomorrow, it's going to delete this row for Saturday and add the values for Sunday in. And then when it runs on Monday, it's going to delete the rows for Sunday and add the values for Monday in. So it's pretty cool little script there that does that. And the last thing there is on this is actually triggering it. So in Google Apps script, if you go over here to the left side and click on triggers, then you can set up a trigger. And basically what I did here is I set up a trigger, and if we edit it, we can kind of see how it works. So we can choose which function we want. These are kind of different functions I've created, but we're looking at record each day. And then the event source is just time driven. And then it's going to be a day timer, which means it runs every day. And then the time of day, you can't really select an exact time, but I just chose 10 p.m. to 11 p.m., which ensures that it's, in that day for sure. But it's still late at night where pretty much everything with the market is all wrapped up and nothing's going to change. And then there's a failure notification thing. You can get notified if it fails to run. So that's about it. That's how that works. Let me know if you do have any questions with the Google Apps scripts and setting this up to run every day. I might at some point, if people are interested, add this to a GitHub page so that other people can basically download this script to their spreadsheets, and maybe they have to alter it a little bit to fit their needs, but it will be a good starting point. And I would definitely be open to questions if anyone has them in the comments below, or to DM me on Instagram or email me or something like that. I'm more than happy to help, and I've helped some people in the past with a few things. So let me know if you think this would be helpful, or if you want me to post it on GitHub. I definitely can do that. And just want to thank you guys for sticking around to the end of the video, and I'll see you in the next one.